Good morning, good morning. So I'm so sorry, I meant to pop on yesterday and talk a little bit more about the river of integration, but my brain my brain was not functioning yesterday. There was something going on with my own river of integration, I think, yesterday. So also been having a few problems with our Wi-Fi and our internet, and lives are just not happening. So I'm going to come on and do a video. So I think what's today, Thursday. So on Tuesday I posted a picture of a woman in a rowing boat with rigidity and chaos on either sides of the river, and that is a lovely picture that represents the model called the River of Integration. And it's a really lovely way of describing our kind of personality traits, I suppose. And for those of you that know me, you know that I'm studying transactional analysis psychotherapy, and that all works on the principle that within us we have things called ego states, and we have a parent, we have an adult, and we have a child ego state. And the river of integration nicely represents those parts of self. So the rigidity camp is likened to the parent ego state, so very much around boundaries and control and very rule bound. Yeah, the chaos side is like referred to the child, so they're chaotic, so almost the opposite, no rules, rebelling, almost like this place of no structure, that kind of thing. And then the river represents the adult, so it's balanced, it has flexibility and adaptability. So the river of integration nicely represents us as humans. And you know, for those of you who can identify the rigid side, and especially when it comes to dieting, there's another term for it called all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking, where we think in extremes. So we're either on a diet or we're off a diet. Even the whole language around food, so good food, bad food, you know, and if you eat good food, so salad and chicken and that kind of thing, it makes us feel good. And then bad foods, pizza and ice cream, if we eat it, we feel guilty and we feel bad about it. So we live in this world of rigidity and chaos. So when you think about the rigid camp, you know, start to think about your own lives, because this isn't just about food. I know for me, I have some rigid, I can be quite controlling. I've really worked on this over the years, but one of the things that I'm really rigid around is time. That comes from my mum. You know, my mum worked full time and she was a busy mum, so everything was regimented around the clock. And I know that I have really, really tight boundaries and beliefs around being punctual and not being late. So it's deeper rooted than just being on time. It's what I make it mean if I'm late. So the impact of that is I live my life quite rigidly. I like to have structure in my life, and if something happens that throws that structure out, I kind of have a temporary meltdown. So I go over to the other camp, going to the chaos world. So you know, this rigid, when we live in this world of rigidity and chaos, the rigid camp kind of, we feel safe when we're there, when we're rule bound and we have structure and we feel safe. So that's a great thing. But when we are too rigid with our boundaries, it can start to cause us upset. It certainly can make people who are around us or live with us or work with us, those relationships quite challenging. So I invite you to think about, you know, what areas of your life are you quite rigid in? Do you feel that you have to be in control? I can think of an example as well. Years ago, I always used, when I was working full time, I used to go to the gym in the morning, and that was my thing. And if I didn't go, I didn't think that I could go in the evening. So it was almost like exercising was something I did in the morning. And so if I didn't go in the morning, I'd just write it off for the day. There was no part of me that actually could negotiate and do it at a different time. So that is, think about that. Think about your own lives. Where are you maybe a bit too rigid? Where are you? Where do you like things to be controlled? You know, think about your home. You know, are you somebody who likes everything to be neat and orderly? And that's great, but how does that work when you're living with people or if the kids make a mess? So that's the rigid side. And then we have the chaos side, and there'll be areas of your life that are quite chaotic, where you don't have structure, you don't have boundaries. And again, you know, on that sort of chaotic side, the free child energy, the spontaneity, the creativity is a really positive thing. But equally, not having any boundaries, especially around food, can start to have a problem. And also, again, if you're quite laid back and you don't take time, you know, if you're somebody who doesn't really care about time, you're going to be late for meetings or you're going to be late for appointments. Again, that's going to start to have an impact on your life. So think about where in your life you don't have tight enough boundaries and the impact of that. That's not something I'm too familiar with. I tend to be more on the rigid camp. I tend to have structure and boundaries in place. That comes from my parents, super organised. But I do have friends that are more in this chaotic lifestyle. And I know for them, they have times where they get overwhelmed because housework gets on top of them. Their to-do lists just get bigger and bigger, and they seem to be wading through treacle a lot of the time. So the ideal in life is, you know, a little bit of chaos is good and a little bit of rigidity is good. You know, we get this healthy balance. And the ideal is that we kind of learn to live in the river of being flexible and of being adaptable, of having rules in place, but also knowing that we can bend the rules at times. And so we kind of learn to live in the flow of the river, and we liken that to the adult self. So this isn't just about our behaviours and our actions. This is about our thinking patterns and also our emotional patterns as well. You know, we can get really stuck in rigidity around how we think about things, and that can be really restricting, and it can stop us from moving forward and being the best version of ourselves that we can be. Equally, we can be really chaotic with our thinking, you know, overthinking, dramatising, catastrophising, and equally with our emotions. You know, on the rigid camp, we can be really rigid with our emotions, not allowing ourselves to feel. But in the chaotic world, we overfeel, if that makes sense. So the idea is that we learn to live in the river, and that we have access to we have access to our thinking, but it's very much in the sort of here and now, and it's very rational and balanced. We have access to appropriate feelings in the moment, and we appropriately behave in the moment with flexibility, with adaptability. So that is the river of integration, and I'm curious about where in your lives you're maybe too rigid, and where in your lives are you maybe you're too chaotic, and start thinking about how that might be influencing your eating patterns. You know, eat not just around dieting, but also the emotional triggers that lead you to overeating. And pop your comments below, because I'm really curious about that. See you later.